One. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited to have you here. I know that people are just joining right now. If you are joining us from a previous event, thank you so much for supporting our week-long celebration. Of course, right now we have an event that I'm very excited about. We have this Los Angeles Spoonie Collective and my amazing cousin, Lilac Maldonado. Before we get started, I would like to begin um, with an acknowledgement and acknowledge that we are occupying unceded Chumash land at Oxnard College, and we would like to honor all of the Chumash people and their traditions. Now, as we continue in this presentation, I would like to let everybody know that we do very much appreciate any interaction. For example, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat or raise your hand. However, we do ask that we keep all of our comments respectful. We will not tolerate any form of discrimination or hate speech, any type of cyberbullying, anything like that. You will be removed. Just think about it like this. If you wouldn't say it to someone in a classroom, please do not say it here. Now, with that out of the way, I would like to introduce the LA Spoonie Collective. I'm going to talk a little bit about what they do and who they are, and then I will let them take over. So LA Spoonie Collective, they facilitate workshops on emergence and development of disability justice and activism. They are an activist group that has done many acts of service throughout the community, and they are part of a modern civil rights movement. So without further ado, we have our amazing presenters that we're so excited to have here. Lilac and Hatfield, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us today. I am going to, I'm really excited to be here with you, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share some of our knowledge with you today. My friend Hatfield system here, Hollow, we have been doing this together for quite some time, since 2016. We've actually been met in college at Cal State Northridge back in around 2012, and have been friends ever since, and have been doing activism and community work throughout several different social justice landscapes. And we're just like so proud to be here with you today. We're going to introduce ourselves. And I'm going to screen share because we have some slides for you. Yay. Give me a second, technology bearing.
There we go.
There we go. And we are in business. All right. Thank you, Canva. And we want to just also thank you for everything that it took to bring you into this space today. We acknowledge that you have so much on your plate as students, especially like during a pandemic, as you are right now. That it takes a lot to bring yourself into a space like this. And where we're going to be having conversation and learning together. And so we encourage you to also join us in the chat as you're able to. And also remind you that we are a disability justice organization, so that we like to always push the importance of taking care of our bodies and minds as you need to, which means if you have to get up and stretch your legs, if you have to go, lay in bed for a while, if you with your screen off, if you have to, go get some food, go to the restroom, take care of yourself. You know yourself best, and we trust you to make good decisions for yourselves. And so excuse me. We are the Los Angeles Spoonie Collective. My name is Lilac Violet Maldonado. I use she and they pronouns. And this is my colleague, Paulo. And yeah. Let me jump into the next slide. Give me a sec, folks. Technology is being a bit slow for me. That was unintended. Uh-oh.
That's us.
There you go. Yeah.
So, as was mentioned before, we're the Los Angeles Spoonie Collective, and we're a group of trans, queer, intersex, and disabled, and chronically ill and neurodiverse folks. And we all work to elevate the voice of the community, and we've been working since 2016. So a lot of our work takes a cryptarchical feminist lens, meaning that it comes from various sources and various identities being brought together. And we offer a number of other workshops, including this 101, including one on intersex solidarity, body love for imperfect bodies, crafting justice, so building your own self-care toolkit so that you can feel supported and empowered when you need that support. Disability, visibility, and erasure in the media, which is our disability and media panel, which is one of our favorites. Intersectional oppression, which is based on race and disability and how they intersect. Ableism in the professional sphere, like school and work, and anywhere professionally, and care work from both sides for people who are doing caregiving work. Some of their experiences, challenges, and what we can do to support them. And we also do a number of artistic endeavors such as zines, poetry, herbalism, and there's just a lot of stuff and amazing resources within our community. Next slide, Lilac. Yeah. Here we go. And we're System Hatfield. So we are a group of individuals sharing a single body, and we really are here to show that people with a lot of oppressed identities can really still be very successful in the world and don't need to bend to unhealthy practices. So we work as librarians, and we're also activists who've done a lot of work with trans and disability justice work, as well as healing justice more recently. And we really love working to create more affirming and helping and great environments to create a better world. And I'm going to turn it over to Lilac to tell a little bit about themselves.
Hey folks, so next slide is coming.
You can talk while you wait, Lilac.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Lilac Violet Maldonado, like I said, and I'm a community organizer and culture worker, which means I work in the arts, and I identify as sick, disabled, and neurodivergent. I'm two-spirit, Chicanx, trans woman, and femme. I've been actively organizing since 2009 around many intersectional social justice issues. Everything from gender justice to LGBTQ political organizing, food justice, all kinds of different things related to these different communities. And most recently, prison abolition work. I'm also an avid zinester who has written and created artwork for various academic and social justice zines. Zines are like DIY booklets that we make This is one of mine called Up with Trans. And I illustrate and write everything inside. You can go on my Instagram and check out more information on that. I also am a mental health educator and support group facilitator with Fireweed Collective, which is a disability justice and healing justice organization that works nationally. And we were recently featured in Mary Claire magazine. Also the social media and communications director of Reclaim Ugly, which is a Black, trans, queer-led healing justice, disability justice organization that Halo and I both work at. And I'm very excited to be here with you today and sharing some of my knowledge that I've been able to pick up throughout the years.
Yay.
Right.
So in this presentation, we're going to be going over basic terminology. So kind of words that are used in disability justice movement. We're going to be talking about some disability theory. And that is going to be just stuff that's very important groundwork to understanding some of the various movements within the disabled community. Disability justice versus disability rights. So talking about the difference between what those two look like and why that difference is very important. We're going to be talking about some of the important people and groups within the movement of disability justice who are really laying some of that groundwork. And we're also going to be then doing a Q&A session. So I'm gonna move it on to talk about what disability justice is. So disability, first thing that we want to ask to all the people in the chat, this is one of the interactive portions because we love that, is what does disability, chronic illness, and neurodiversity mean to you? Before we go into our definitions.
Yeah, and here we have an image that's kind of, you see, of some optical nerves, and it's, you see a bunch of different words that are popping out at you, intersectionality, leadership of the most impacted, anti-capitalism, cross-movement organizing, wholeness, sustainability, cross-disability solidarity, interdependence, collective access, and collective liberation. This is an image from the group Since Invalid, and it is part of the 10 Principles of Disability Justice written by our amazing friend, Patty Berne. Yeah, go ahead and respond in the chat. We'd like to hear from you. Professor Maldonado, do we have any responses in the chat right now?
I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Oh, here we go. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Are you able to read that, Lilac?
I can see them now.
Yes. Okay, there we go. So yeah, if you'd like, go ahead and run through them. I was just going to read them to you in case you were not able to see them, but since you can, go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Ah, neat. So a lot of those concepts are going to be concepts that we actually talk about within disability justice. So that's going to be really great that a lot of people are keying in to a lot of the words. And
so yeah, so Hatfield, if I can jump in. Mm-hmm. So I see Randall Searcy, thank you. To me, the terms represent humans of promise as we all are. Carla Ramirez says, disability justice to me means taking care of all folks. Thank you for that. Sierra Fishman, neurodiversity to me means a person who thinks in a unique fashion. Carla adds, listening to what folks need and addressing those needs. Kathleen says intersectionality. And Emily agrees with Carla. She says, yes, listening.
Awesome.
So what does disability justice look like? So it's important to understand that all bodies are unique and essential. Everyone has a different body and a different way of navigating the world. And all bodies have strengths and needs that must be met in order to be successful and to survive, and to be supported. And it's important also to recognize that we are all powerful, and despite our complexities with our bodies, not despite our complexities with our bodies, but because our bodies are all different and complicated things. And that bodies, of course, are confined to ability, race, gender, sexuality, class, nation, state, religion, and more. And we really cannot separate that from who we are as people. So I'm going to move it on to Lilac.
Awesome. So I don't know why this image is not loading. So here we're talking about what is what is healing justice? What does healing justice look like? So I'm going to start with a quote from Kara Page of the Kindred Southern Healing Collective, and she says, "Healing justice is a framework that identifies how we can holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence to bring collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on our bodies, hearts, and minds." So this is saying that, so basically saying that in order to address all these social justice movements and all these ills that we have in society, we first have to start and heal ourselves. And that means prioritizing the health and wellness of our bodies, of our people, of our land, and our relation to each other, and how those things can then foster change from interpersonal level up into institutional levels, and then systemic levels, you know? What we are trying to, the discussion that we're trying to encourage here with healing justice is that centering the genius of leaderships of disabled people, chronically ill people is important, because we know what it's like to survive. We've lived in this world with like various hardships on our body minds, and because of this, we've been able to adapt and adjust and actually innovate new ways of existing. And because we have to do things at a much more sluggish pace, that slowness actually allows for growth and mirrors the natural world that grows slowly, right? So yeah, and also it means saying no to the medical industrial complex's idea of like you're either cured or you're useless, right? So it's the idea that that everything must be cured, and we're saying that actually we're part of a biodiverse world where we have all kinds of different bodies that really just kind of like exist in a variety of different ways because of different reasons. Some of that is because of trauma, intergenerational trauma that has been inflicted on us because of, you know, things like capitalism, things like colonialism, and all kinds of things that have, like, you know, caused us to become ill or caused us to be disabled. And some of us just because, you know, our bodies function differently. our brains function differently, it doesn't mean that our bodies and minds are not valuable. So next, I'm gonna show you a slide that comes from the Icarus Project, which is a project that has now become a Fireweed Collective, which I belong to. And it is basically showing you healing justice versus the medical industrial complex. And what I want to show here is this is an idea that they took of a tree, right? And the tree has roots and a trunk and a body and branches, and then it goes out to leaves and fruit. And in here, they're trying to talk about mental health and how the foundations of the mental health system when they were actually proper and adequate, how they kind of foster into positive things. But we kind of like want to take this model, and I'm gonna do a new share now and do a whiteboard.
So Lilac, while you do that, I just wanted to jump in. I'm sorry about that. I want to share.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of flowers in the chat. For example, we have, let me see, give me a second. So we have Randall Searcy. He jumped in and they said, healing justice includes seeking to always engage our social and physical environment with sighted eyes and feeling hearts. And Jasmine Garcia says, yes, snaps, snaps, snaps. I love your words, Lilac. So I just wanted to share that with you. And you can go ahead and go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your feedback. So I'm just gonna do a simple, not the best artist on this whiteboard thing. I actually do art in, I am an artist, but I just like, this is not the tea, I'm telling you right now. So I'm just gonna draw a tree here. And we can imagine it being, roots. And then we have the earth covering it. Okay. And when we think about the medical industrial complex, right? And we think about things like hospitals and all kinds of different kinds of like doctors, social workers, therapists, all these kinds of things. When we think about them, we have to kind of think about it as a tree, right? So it's like, these are the roots of the foundation, right? So I want you in the chat, when you think of some of the things that are the foundation of the medical industrial complex that you've heard about, some of the things that really inform who they are and how they practice. And we think about some of the social ills that arise from this. What do you think of when you think of the foundations? So for me, some of the things, excuse me, that come up for me are things like medical testing on Black bodies. And I'll put that in here. So I think about people like Henrietta Lacks, who had her cervical cells harvested against her will to make the HeLa, model that they used to treat cervical cancer. I think about the I forget the name of the town. I think it's Montgomery, Alabama, where they had the syphilis. Where they did the syphilis cases where they were not actually treating the black folks in that community in order to see what would happen to their bodies. The Tuskegee, yeah. Forced sterilization of BIPOC women, yes. There's a wonderful film about that called No Más Bebés. So.
Yeah, Lilac, actually, I'm really glad you mentioned that documentary, No Más Bebés, because we actually, of course, pre-COVID, we screened that documentary here on campus at Oxnard College. So as we can see, we have so many examples of this. And I also wanted to share one of the chats, one of the attendees who chatted, and this is from Professor David Carlander from Ventura College. He says, I think of money, how monetized it all is, and that while we can treat and heal people, we often don't because of insurance and income restrictions. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to you. But before I do, Lilac, I just want to point out to all of our attendees, you might not be able to see all of the chats coming through on your screen, but I assure you they are coming through. We can see when you post, so please don't let that deter you. If you're not able to see your chat on the screen, it's okay. We can see it and we'll make sure to read it for you. All right, Lilac, go ahead.
Okay, so we have stuff like monetization of our bodies, right? Right, we have things like women not being believed for women not being believed, you know, for pain, women not being believed for their pain, and Black mothers and Black infants not surviving. We think about all these things, and all these things are the foundation or the earth, right? And they represent maybe like they are maybe like the water in the aquifer and the minerals in the earth and all the things that go in there. And so then they go up into the roots of the tree, right? And they give nutrients to the tree. All of these things, all of these institutional racism, systemic, you know, like systemic racism, the oppression of poor people, the oppression of like immigrants. So if you're undocumented, you can't get services. The inaccessibility of treatment and healthcare and drugs that are necessary for treatment. All these things kind of build the institutions that we talk about. So we talk about like the institutions like hospitals, right? And private and public hospitals. We talk about social work, all these things that social workers and social and public institutions that provide care and health to our communities. So what happens, and you can join me in the chat and tell me what happens when we have these. What are the fruits of this? I'm gonna draw some delicious poisonous apples here for y'all. What are some of the fruits that arise from this, right? So what are some of the fruits that arise from this? Like we are seeing it right now in the news, right? Like we're seeing like Black and brown people not trusting the medical industrial complex to go get their COVID vaccine. I just got my second Moderna this afternoon. So yeah, Dolores Ortiz says, yeah, distrust of the medical system. Yeah, people don't go, you know, to the doctor unless like they're on death's doorstep, right? Shortened lifespans for sure, particularly with respect to Black and brown communities. Yeah, all this stuff, y'all. We definitely see all of this stuff. We see a lack of understanding about neurodiversity that results in deaths at the hands of police, such as autistic children and adults. Yes, especially, I forget his name, but there was a young man who was a Black autistic man who was walking home from work, and one of his ways of stimming was dancing and singing as he walked through the neighborhood, right? And stimming is things that neurodivergent people do to be able to manage their anxiety or to manage any kind of feelings they're going through. His name is Elijah McClain. Thank you, Sarah Fishman. And he was, accosted by police and lost his life. Yeah, trans youth not being able to access care that they need, right? Not being able to like attain puberty blocking drugs. There's an amazing film out there that my friend Dante Alencastre produced called Raising Zoe. And it's about a young girl, a friend of mine who I've known since she was in 5th grade, and about some of her struggles with the school system. And I recommend it. And increased implicit bias against anything other or different, right? Like a fear of Eastern medicine, that people would not go get acupuncture if they could get help for pain because they didn't trust that because it wasn't a mainstream Western practice. Awesome. So now we see how all of these fruits actually if they're not harvested, and all of these leaves, they will eventually fall down, wither and fall down, and actually become nutrients themselves that will be sucked back into the system and create new cycles of harm. So how do we interrupt the medical industrial complex? So we do this. We interrupt the medical industrial complex by actually making our own tree that is rooted in healing justice, right? So when I say the word healing, and I'm asking you to join me again in the chat and tell me, when you think of healing and justice, what are words that come up for you? Like, what are thoughts that come up for you?
So Lilac, while we wait for folks to jump in the chat and provide us with responses, I'd also like to acknowledge a few other comments from earlier. For example,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Jasmine Garcia says that one of the fruits is biases within the medical system for anyone who isn't quote unquote normal. David Carlander, he writes in apathy and acceptance that, well, it's the system and that's what we got. Also, Carla Ramirez, thank you. She says, trans youth not being able to access the care they need. Professor Emily Zwall from Oxnard College says that oftentimes what happens is decisions are made about communication. An example she provides is cochlear implantation for deaf people rather than deaf people rather than by them. So this results in many cases in language deprivation, and all of that comes from this idea of oppression, right? And it looks like we have a lot of great responses in terms of how we can combat that. So Lilac, if you like, would you like to go through those as well?
Yeah, we
Thank
have
you.
medical professionals believing and validating us. Great. We have understanding, communication. Oops, sorry. And access, great.
Don't worry about spelling Lilac. I teach English, but I'm off the clock right now, so we won't even pay attention to that. No worries.
We combat medical tourism. Yeah, definitely. Equitable access to quality care. So yes, quality care. Awesome. So when we have stuff like this, and you can keep chiming in the chat. We love it. So when we have all of this, it then goes, like we were talking before, it goes into the roots, right? It's these are the nutrients in the earth, right? That it naturally seeks out and uses to sustain itself, right? So, and then we built institutions from this. Now, what kind of institutions can we imagine come from these kinds of things? Well, we don't have to look that far to actually identify these, because our people have been doing this work forever, right? We have things like herbalist practices in our communities where we have like an intentional relationship with the land and use earth for healing. We have things like the Black Panthers and had an ambulance program because their communities were not getting actual care when they were in emergency situations. So in Oakland, they ran this program where you can call them and they will transport you in case of an emergency or a need to get to seek medical treatment. We have like places in New York City where we have places where people can go when they are in mental health crisis mode, and go receive treatment and without having to go inpatient. We have places like my friends in Puerto Rico run a community clinic called Las Abuelas, where the abuelitas of the town were noticing that there was a high suicide rate with their youth, and so they helped open this little place where the abuelas would come and help make food for people, and then there would be community people who are actually trained in what we call street therapy and all kinds of like de-escalation and different modalities of mental health healing that can come and talk to people and help them. You know, they're not licensed professionals, but they are there, you know, giving help. And this is a way that we have, you know, held each other throughout the years. And it actually ways that we have survived, and we can actually look at these for opportunities to learn how we can inform our, you know, like our community endeavors towards healing. And so when we think about this, and I ask you to join me again one more time in the chat, and we think about the kind of fruit that is born from this, and I'm gonna draw some like delicious oranges on this tree that are non-toxic and non-GMO probably. Yeah. No GMOs here. These are not Monsanto oranges, I promise you.
As opposed to the...
So Lilac, while you're drawing those delicious, responsibly sourced, non-GMO organic
fair trade.
Fair trade, yes. I'm gonna go through a couple of comments in the chats. Thank you to everyone, by the way, for participating. So for instance, Elena points out, we need to make decisions for medical care is made by insurance companies instead of medical professionals. So true. Carla Ramirez says that we need educational institutions implementing more understanding practices in classrooms and campuses for differently abled students. Amen to that, Carla. I believe we did address Professor Ortiz's point, but I'll just reiterate. Addressing generational and systemic trauma, acknowledging, privileging, and learning about ancestral healing knowledge, so true. Joy would like to point out that they agree with Carla. Carla also adds community response teams instead of calling the cops would be a good idea. And Adrian would like to thank you for those delicious fruits. David Carlander says we need a greater prioritization of mental healthcare and upping our budget for it big time. So, yeah, and yes, thank you, Adrian. They point out differently abled is not a preferred term for disabled folks. And this is, of course, it's something that's an ongoing discussion. So we do appreciate that. Okay, Lilac, go ahead.
Awesome. So what kind of fruits are being born here? I think when I think of these different kinds of like institutions that are actually community institutions, I think, and thank you so much for the conversations around differently able and disabled. I really appreciate y'all stepping up and really sharing knowledge with each other and being gentle with one another and respecting one another's growing edges, as we all are coming from different places of learning. But I think of like things like trusting our medical professionals, knowing our bodies and knowing that we know our bodies best. So having like a trust of ourselves and our bodies, which is actually something our system does not teach because they want us to defer to medical professionals for everything. We think of things like affordable and accessible childcare, right? So that you can go to the doctor, right? So that you can, so that, you know, if you have to like take care of your family, you can go to a clinic on a Saturday, and, you know, if you need to, if you can, you know, you shouldn't have to pay out of pocket. Things like socialized medicine, you know, where people, you know, are able to actually like I have a friend who is a refugee from Honduras who couldn't get care here in the U.S. and she had to flee um, to Lisbon, Portugal, to be able because she has an endocrine issue, and she's a trans woman, and she had to flee there and is now awaiting seeking asylum there. But as she's seeking asylum, she's able to get free medical care where she's able to go see specialists to get her endocrine issues taken care of. So we need stuff like that. And this is the kind of stuff that will be born from healing justice. So, and it comes from our communities first, right? So, and then it trickles, and instead of it trickling down, it goes up and it feeds this fruit. And then this fruit, then when the rest of it isn't harvested, and the leaves and the fruit fall down, and then it creates a cycle of healing so that we are able to circumvent harm in the long run. So I'm gonna go back to our slides. Yes. And thank you so much for being here with us again. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate how active y'all have been with us. Are you able to see this?
See a white screen.
Active presentation.
Yeah, it'll pop up in a bit. We see a white screen right here. But yeah, we do encourage everybody to please continue. We really appreciate the respectful conversation that we're having in the chat. Also, some folks, so when you chat, please make sure that it goes to all panelists and attendees. I know that as an attendee, you have a drop-down option where you can either chat with all panelists or all panelists and attendees. So make sure you go to that second one that says panelists and attendees. So it looks like the slide is ready to go. Go ahead, y'all. Thank you.
Great. Great. So now I'm gonna pass it on to Hollow because she's gonna talk to a little bit about ableism. And I put in lots of funny memes for your viewing pleasure.
So we have a really great definition here. Basically, ableism is a set of beliefs and practices that discriminate against people who are with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities. So what this often means is that people want to fix people with disabilities. You especially see this in medical models, that you especially see this in autism communities, unfortunately. Yesterday we ran into, doing grant writing work, ran into another org that has this model where it's all parents or professionals that are supposed to deal with autism, instead of just allowing people to be as they are and to have their own voice, to instead try to force a voice upon them. And that goes back to, I think, an important point about ableism, which is that what is ableist, or in any community, what is seen as discriminatory needs to be defined by that community, not by an outside source. It needs to be by and for that community. People need to respect and understand that. And when people don't, then you get a lot of these like Autism Speaks orgs, which if you don't know about Autism Speak, just know that it's a very bad org that, again, follows that medicalized cure model and does not really have any autism representation within the org, and is really toxic and has been making money off of people's neurodiversity for a long time. So let's see. Now we're gonna move to the next slide, which will be lilacs. So
disability. We were asking y'all earlier to help us define disability. Now, our friends at Invalid have like a really wonderful working definition. It says, we define disability broadly to include people with physical impairments, people who belong to a sensory minority, people with emotional disabilities, people with cognitive challenges, and those with with chronic or severe illness. So physical impairments can be somebody who's like has who's an amputee, somebody with a sensory minority. Sensory minority may be somebody who has sensory issues like Down's syndrome or something like that. And people with emotional disabilities can be someone with, like, for example, bipolar or borderline personality disorder, anxiety. People with cognitive challenges could be someone who has autism, and then somebody with chronic illness can be someone who has something like diabetes or Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis, for example. And these are all kinds of different conditions, but a lot of us do not have access to diagnosis because we live in a capitalist system in the United States where we do not have equitable access to healthcare. So it's oftentimes people experience disability without having a diagnosis.
So when we talk about invisible disabilities, we're talking about a disability that could affect people's movement, senses, or activities, but that most people can't see. So this affects a lot of people in their daily life and can lead to all sorts of, unfortunately, false perceptions and judgments. And this can happen to just about everyone who has an invisible disability. We've had plenty of experiences with that. For example, we can't drive because we have a spatial patterning disability, and that makes it difficult for us to make spatial-based decisions in a quick, rapid environment. So that's made transportation for us very difficult, but it's also been very difficult to access any sort of support for that. And there have been times where we've had like Lyft drivers who are supposed to be, who again, we have to pay for out of pocket to go to work, and they haven't been, they've drove around and then canceled the ride, and we were already late and had to do another lift. And because of disclosing that, we had some trouble at work. Whereas if we had not been disabled or just said that we had car trouble and not disclosed our disability at all, then we would have been treated very differently than the way we're treated. So there's a lot of stigma when you're invisibly disabled, often when trying to access service, and people questioning whether you deserve that service, which should not be the conversation point at all. So I'm going to move it on to chronic illness with Lilac.
Yes. So the news source The Mighty actually helps us define this. It's actually a really cool place. I recommend y'all to go and check out all kinds of different perspectives on chronic illness. And it says a chronic illness is a health condition or a disease that is persistent and in its effects, or a disease that comes with time. The term chronic is used if the condition lasts longer than 3 months. So this could be anything from HIV and AIDS to, like we said, diabetes, to Crohn's disease, or any sickle cell anemia, all of these different conditions that actually make us feel unwell in some kind of way in our bodies. And they're oftentimes long lasting. Sometimes they can be episodic, where they come on and off. And it's just stuff like maybe endometriosis or some kind of skin psoriasis is sometimes on and off, but they last oftentimes a lifetime, because there's infrequently any kind of cure that you can actually fine for these. And that's why we have such an issue with a cure narrative, because there's so much more conditions that are not actually able to be cured, and we still find ways to live very full lives with our conditions.
Picture disappeared again. Oh well.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with this slideshow.
For some people who are not used to neurodiversity, this might be a little bit more of a complicated term, but neurodiversity just focuses on everyone in humanity as a whole, and individuals are not neurodiverse. They're either neurodivergent or neuroatypical. But basically what neurodiversity means is a different way of looking at what some people might call disability, and instead looking at it as a different way of dealing with the world and dealing with perspective. And this term was coined actually by the autism movement as a counteractive, because of a lot of these, again, cure narratives that autism needs to be cured and is not a part of people and not valued as an aspect of who people are. But it also includes people who are ADHD, who have bipolar disorder, epilepsy, dyslexia, OCD, or people like us who are multiples and have multiple people sharing a body. So it's against a pathologization, and it's a way of really saying that in reality, people don't just have one way of working with the world or perceiving or interacting with the world, and that's important to recognize through people, is that everyone has a different way of working with the world, and some is more different than others.
Yeah, awesome. I am going to actually, if you excuse me, I'm going to actually move forward a little bit in our discussion, because of time. We wanted to talk to you about some of the theories that we have here. And one of the important ones that we share with you, especially as it pertains to us, is we're the Los Angeles Spoonie Collective. And it kind of comes from this idea called spoon theory, which you see is a woman in the slide. Her name is Christine Miserandino, and she was a lupus. She's a lupus patient who was with her friend in a diner one day, and she's asking, so what's it really like to have lupus? How can you explain the difference? I don't think I really still get it. And so she ran around and she grabbed all the spoons in the diner, and there was about like maybe 15 of them. And so she gave her friend 10 and she took 5. She's like, this represents all the energy we have in the day, right? So you have 10, I have 5. Now, everything costs energy, right? So sometimes like getting ready for your day, driving to work, and that might be 2 spoons, right? And then working a day, that might be 5 spoons. And then coming home, driving home, picking up your kids, picking up your dry cleaning, that might be another spoon. And then making dinner. Anyways, by the end of the day, you might have 1 spoon or 2 spoons left. And you might say, okay, I'm gonna spend it, on me, taking care of myself, whatever I have to do, recreation. Now, I have the same amount of things to do, but because I have lupus, I only have 5 spoons. So I have to everyday budget how I'm going to use these spoons and be very, very smart, knowing that I have, maybe 5 to 30 different spoons worth of work that I still have to do. So that's but when you run out of spoons, you're absolutely done, right? You are, you have to go to bed, you have to sometimes go get treatment, you're not feeling well. And because of this, we have like a term called Spoonies, which is basically a Spoonie is a person living with chronic illness, right? Or somebody who's living with like some kind of way that the world disables their bodies and minds, right? And so, so Spoonies are people that live with chronic illness, theoretically measuring their daily abilities as one would measure amount of spoons needed for an event or an occasion. Sometimes having an abundance, other times coming up short. And that's where we get our name. And there's a lot of other theories that we would love to share with you. But in the interest of time, we're going to talk a little bit about disability justice versus disability rights. Yeah, we're going to forego the break. Sorry, we wanted to put a break in there. And
so, Lilac, if I may, really quickly. We are scheduled to run up until 2:30. I mentioned earlier 2:15, but we've got up to 2:30 now. We are hoping, of course, to be able to also have a Q&A, talk about some of the things in the chat. However, it's okay if we run a little bit past that time. All it means is that our YouTube stream will end at 2:30. We can continue a couple minutes afterwards, so please don't feel rushed or anything. But yeah, we can continue on with this, and then we'll go into the chat and Q&A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Aldo, do you want to take it from here?
Yep. Yay. So when looking at disability rights, disability rights is very much like a legal framework for people in the disabled community. And disability rights has done a number of really great things for the community. I don't want to put it entirely down. Like ADA is very important and was revolutionary for schools and has helped disabled people in some ways. But the problem is that it centers really citizenship and legal framework. So if you're undocumented, you don't have a lot of that support. A lot of it's about enforcing laws. And those laws are limited, and often limited to what would be useful for everyone. A lot of people like to frame narratives in that this ramp would be good for everyone. Everyone could use this ramp that we've installed or something like that, that legally they had to install for ADA. But if you're looking for specific services, it often requires you also have documentation, and that's very difficult, limiting, especially if you need to be able to find a specialist and to be able to afford a specialist to get that documentation. If you're a person of color, often you have even more hurdles to go over in terms of accessibility due to poverty and accessibility to mental health and physical health care. And it just puts a lot of the work on disabled people to jump those hoops in order to be successful. And that's not good. And now when we talk about disability rights, we're also talking about often a single issue thing. So disability rights hasn't really included a lot of the other intersections other than white disabled people, typically with mobility issues. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lilac.
So like in 2005, disabled queers and activists of color began discussing like a second wave of disability rights. And this is like oftentimes, this is an organization called Since Invalid that kind of arose out of the Bay Area. And around that time, they started noticing how like our communities are often treated as disposable, especially like under like all the things that are happening in our world today. And so in there's like, we have all these different intersections of oppression that are kind of like skewering us, right? And we have like they have as if they're like the spokes on the hub of a wheel, right? So they are, we have all these different things. We have capitalism, we have white supremacy, we have, you know, like able-bodied supremacy, we have, you know, all these different kinds of things that are happening that are affecting us in our different identities. And if we just like take one out, the wheel is still intact, you know. And you know, we have all these different things that we have to like destroy the entire thing. We have to, so that's what disability justice does. And disability justice is really about centering people's needs, and it's about staying away from respectability politics. So respectability politics has its root, has anti-Black roots, and it's actually sought to blame Black people excuse me, for their own oppression. It's it's a form of moral standards used by prominent figures from various marginalized groups to police some of their fellow group members. And proponents of respectability politics attempt to portray their personal social values as being normative, and they prefer not to challenge the mainstream for its failure to accept the marginalized group. They do not accept that diversity also exists within the group. Now, a good example of this is like within the LGBTQ community, which is a community we're a part of in Los Angeles Spoonie Collective, is when Stonewall happened in 1969, which was like the when people talk about like the birthplace of the modern LGBT civil rights movement, where drag queens and trans women and their friends rallied back against police coming in there and raiding it and taking them, you know, in paddy wagons to jail for being, you know, in what was back then illegal to be, you know, in the transgressive gendered clothing. And so they did all this work, but then like later 1971, when they were having a big pride parade, they have pride every year in June to commemorate this happening worldwide now. They have pride in every city, small and big. But they booed Sylvia Rivera, who was one of the people who threw one of the first like bricks at Stonewall against the police, and they like booed her off stage. And this often happens where people who have power will oftentimes quiet the voices of other people to try to get their own interests across. You know, you see this in every community. We see this in the feminist community a lot, where sex workers are shamed and not listened to, and you know, or like the needs of, you know, of women of color are not prioritized, and we saw, you know, the division amongst, you know, Sojourner Truth and some of the other like feminists in the first wave of feminism in the 1800s. And so this is something where disability justice is going strongly against. So now we're going to talk about some of the people doing the work in the community. And excuse our internet is not allowing me to load up these images that are actually really cool, and I wish I could share with you. But we're going to talk about, I'm going to give it to Hollow.
Okay, so we're going to go through these super fast, but there will be references on your sheet.
I'm sorry, so just really quickly, if you'd like, while Hatfield is going through that, Lilac, you can look through for these images and share them in the chat so that we can see them.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Hatfield. Sorry about that.
So we're going to be moving through these quick so that we can get to the Q&A. But Sins Invalid is a really awesome organization. We want to take at least a bit of time to talk about them. Sins Invalid works on projects and helps to support artists with disability and really centers LGBTQIA plus and gender variant artists. Since Invalid's performances talks about sexuality, embodies the disabled body as provocative, that really challenges what people claim is normal or sexy, instead creates a vision of beauty and sexuality that includes all sorts of people. And they've done a lot of amazing work.
Great. The next organization we want to talk about is Disability Justice Culture Club. This is one of our sister organizations up in the Bay Area. And it's a collective of disabled and neurodivergent queer people of color that's in East Oakland or Shoshone land, in Ohlone land. And their organizing efforts center the lives of queer, trans, Black and Indigenous people of color. And they actually have a house that's like a meeting ground for events and stuff before COVID. And one of their founders, Stacey Park Milburn, who passed away last year, actually was a contributor to the film Crip Camp, which is on Netflix, which is now nominated for an Academy Award for Best Documentary Film, and follows the lives of some of the folks who met at a youth disabled camp in the East Coast, and actually became part of the big uprising for the ADA that started in the 70s and finally reached came to fruition in 1990.
So the Disability Visibility Project does so many different amazing things. And one of their big leaders is Alice Wong, and you might have heard of them because of a lot of the latest COVID conversations involving disabled people, and Alice Wong was interviewed, but it does a lot to get disabled narratives and disabled voices out there through both, you have oral histories, but you also have a lot of media campaigns that they do and have done to increase the visibility and create platforms for voices for disabled people. And there's so much that they do that's really amazing and worth checking out.
Yeah, we recommend that you check out Story Corps, which is one of their projects that people tell their stories and are often animated to really cool little vignettes. Next, we're going to talk about the Deaf Queer Resource Center, which is started in San Francisco in 1995 by our friend Drago Renteria. And when you think about it, like, how many deaf queers do you think there must be in the country for there to be an organization needed for deaf queer folks? So like it's estimated that roughly 10% of the population is LGBTQIA+, which I think is probably a bit low, but we also have, according to the National Association of the Deaf, there are currently 28 million deaf and hard of hearing people in the US. Now, if you multiply 10% by 20 million, you get a figure of around 2.8 million deaf and hard of hearing queers. And we say deaf with a capital D instead of a lowercase d, because lowercase d refers to the condition, and D, uppercase D is the community, the people, the culture. And there's a very rich culture and language in various deaf communities around the world.
So the Kindred Southern Healing Collective was created in 2007, and it's a response largely to the trauma, violence, and social conditions. It was created right after Hurricane Katrina, but there has been so much struggles especially in southern areas for disabled and people of color and all sorts of intersections. The South has been a traditionally difficult place. So its services of offering support and counseling has been really important, and they've really helped to create a healing group, an activist group throughout the South, which is something that is incredibly important for our communities down there and something we definitely wanted to highlight.
Awesome. Now, this is supposed to be us. But, yeah. So we're the Los Angeles Spoonie Collective, and we're a group comprised of disabled, neurodivergent, and chronically ill LGBTQIA+ people within the Los Angeles area, situated on Tongva land. A lot of really cool different programs, and I'm going to talk about some today. Our first one we're talking about is Limitless Letters. It's a pen pal program between disabled transgender people and incarcerated transgender people. And this was started actually in response to one of our sister organizations being barred from not being able to support trans prisoners who they serve inside Georgia prisons because they were barred from the mailing list. So this is during the holidays, and they were afraid that the incarcerated folks they were serving were not going to be able to get any Christmas cards or anything for the holidays, and they really depend on this because not just to get a Christmas card, but actually we have seen that that has been studied that when incarcerated folks receive mail coming in from the outside, from family or friends, that they are less likely to be subjected to violence at the hands of guards. And we often see a lot of violence and even loss of life. You can look up Layleen Polenko, who was a trans woman, who was who was at Rikers Island, who was killed because she was not supposed to be put in solitary confinement, and they put her in there, and she had and she did not receive care, and she ended up dying of her condition. And this actually happens a lot of times because oftentimes people who are in prison are people of color, who are oftentimes poor, who are oftentimes disabled, because like these systems disable our bodies, and prisons disable our bodies, and so we've been able to create this program to bridge the gap so that there is people checking in on folks and making sure they're getting that they're having their rights respected, that they're able to get the things that they need. And also, so we're working right now with Trans Latina Coalition, which is an amazing organization. We're going to be putting some links in the chat of organizations that you can check out. Some of them are awesome, like Transcending Barriers in Atlanta, Georgia, which does a lot of abolition work. Also, some is like Black and Pink, which is a pen pal program. And you can even go on our website and check us out, because we have we have ways where you can get involved also. We also have a Care Web, which is a network within our collective of about 30 of us, where we are able to take care of each other and provide mutual aid, meaning that we're able to provide help and relief to each other, but also receive it. So it's a way of us being able to just help each other out. And also we have a zine collective. We have a zine book club that we're starting up next month. And you can check that out on our website if you're interested in coming and, reading some of our zines and getting familiar with our work and doing some workshops with us, making your own zines. Have a little workshop. It's like a storytelling workshop where you learn to tell your own story about your people, where you come from. And we have a lot of virtual and in-person workshops like these and others that will be coming up in the future. And we really invite you to come and join us on social media. Look for us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Awesome. Go ahead, Paulo.
So we'll be quick with this, but one thing I want everyone to think about, and if they like, they could also post, is why do you think we use the word accomplice? Because accomplice, we can say from our perspective, an accomplice, instead of like an ally or a supporter or something like that, means that it's an ongoing process and it's defined by community. So if somebody's who's oftentimes disabled people don't have their voices listened to or supported, and have been isolated because of that. And it's really important to recognize that what is actually supporting disabled people really needs to be defined by disabled people. And it's using the privileges and resources we have to really help other people. And by helping them with what they want to have if you're not a disabled person, and listening in to disabled people. An accomplice is something that has to be ongoing also. That's the other reason why we use that term, I think, because, somebody cannot just be defined as an accomplice. They have to be going through an ongoing process. It's not just continuously, it's not just doing one thing and then going, oh, I'm good. It's leveraging those privileges whenever possible to support other people. And now it is time for Q&A.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I do want to point out, as mentioned before, we were originally scheduled to run up until 2:30. We might go a couple of minutes beyond that, which we have already, but I do want to include this message that our sign language interpreter and captioner may not be able to join us for the entire time. And I do apologize. However, we did have a set schedule. So if you are in need of those services, we do apologize. We might not be able to accommodate you for the entire time that we run. We're hoping that this will be a couple of minutes. I did want to share, Lilac, a couple of posts from earlier. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to get through all of them just in the interest of time, but a few that stood out. For example, earlier, Clara, when you were speaking about autism, Clara said, "This conversation is making me emotional because it's an ideal system. It is an ideal system I hope is implemented for all. I have an autistic child who I fear for his health and safety all the time. And the only way I can assure his future is by educating myself and voicing my concerns, and especially his, and most of all, know our rights." And we had a similar post. Actually, let's go to Carla really quickly. Carla says, "Thank you for sharing this, Hatfield. I also cannot drive due to similar reasons and am made to feel bad for not being able to drive. Thank you for your words." So we really do appreciate you sharing that. And we're gonna go down to Sierra Fishman, who points out, "My son is autistic and quote unquote curing him would mean fundamentally changing who he is. I dislike the idea that everyone should behave quote unquote normally." So thank you so much for sharing that. Francesca says, "Lifelong anxiety, fear, and panic issues have caused me to do so much differently than the quote unquote average person. And I'm always made to feel bad or weird for doing so. This conversation is so open and wonderful. Thank you." And we do acknowledge that some of these folks may not be in the call still because they might have had to go to class or to work or something like that. But I did want to share those with you because they had a huge impact in terms of, just what you were saying, just to let you know that you're doing amazing work. Professor Zwall from Oxnard College, she teaches ASL. She says, "I appreciate that the deaf community was included here." As I scrolled through, we have, as you can see, we have all the links and everything. included in the chat. Kathleen says, the term accomplice indicates that there is a shared work toward a shared goal of sustained equitability and accountability. And Carla seconds that.
Yes.
Carla says, accomplices, not allies. Randall, we love you all. Thank you for honoring us with your creative justice work. Professor Wall, again, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Lilac and Hatfield, for using your spoons to educate us today. Very well said. So if you have a question, now would be the time to ask it in the chat, because as we said, we're running short on time. We want to honor the time of our sign language interpreter and our captioner. So it is now just about 10 minutes after our time. So if you have any questions, speak now or forever hold your peace. We do want to thank everyone for joining us. As it says on the slide, thank you for that, Lilac. It looks like we don't have any questions coming in from the audience. Great presentation. It was amazing. We had a great turnout, amazing interaction with the audience. Before we close, is there anything that you'd like to tell us? Lilac, oh, here we have Jasmine. Thank you. I love the work y'all are doing. Do y'all have any internship opportunities? And that's from Jasmine Garcia.
We don't have any internship opportunities at Spooney Collective because we are still trying to get our nonprofit status, but we do have internship opportunities at Reclaim Ugly. And if you go to reclaimugly.org, you can look up more information about us. And we are looking for folks to help us. We're also a disability justice organization that Hatfield and I work at, and we're looking for folks to help us plan this big conference that we're going to be doing, Healing Justice Conference. There's going to be a 10-day conference next spring, and we would love to have folks from Ventura and Oxnard colleges come and represent the amazing students in Ventura County.
Yes, and we have the link there to reclaimugly.org in the chat. Hatfield, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And there's all sorts of, even before the conference, really big things happening. Black Healing October is coming. It feels like it might be a long way away, but it is coming up fast as a grant writer. I can tell you that. And that's going to be an entire month dedicated to communities by and for Black community. So that's going to be really awesome. And then we have Solidarity September, the month before that, which is going to have a whole bunch of things about fighting lookism and how lookism affects people. And it's going to be a media campaign, but we're also going to have some like reflections and workshops. There's just going to be a ton of things happening for that as well.
Awesome. Also, my organization, Fireweed Collective, we are a healing justice organization, and we are going to be, we are doing webinars, a webinar this month. It's called, one led by an amazing leader named Elliot Fukui, who's a part of our presentation, called This Capitalism is Killing Me. And it's about enduring capitalism as a disabled person, as a person of color, as any kind of marginalized person during this time, and how we can use mutual aid to kind of like bolster our own survival. We also have support groups. We have all kinds of support groups, including creative art support groups where we tell our stories and like write poetry. And we have special groups for, queer and trans people of color. We have special groups for immigrants. We have all kinds of social spaces. And also we, this Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm going to be doing a panel called Analysis Pending Revolution. And it's with the Graduate Assembly of UC Berkeley. And it's about prison abolition and like a lot of the community work that we're doing. So I put the link in the chat if you're interested in registering. It is free to go. It's being held by the University of California, Berkeley. And I would love to see some of your faces there.
All right,
That's it
Lilac.
for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Lilac and Hatfield for joining us today. We are going to wrap up our presentation. Remember that you can always watch this again and share it with folks on YouTube. It will be posted there shortly on the district YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining us, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you for inviting us.
Absolutely. Make sure you Hatfield and Lilac stay on for a couple of minutes right now. But everyone else, thank you so much. Who's left? Who has survived the zombie apocalypse?
Survived? Yes, no, what shape? Who knows?
Apocalypse. Says it's still